Welcome, everyone. This is ADHD Unveiled, What We Know Now in the Journey of a Lifetime, with presenters Robin Nordmeyer and Riley Karbon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sherry Fewer, and I'm your room host for this workshop. A few general things before we begin. Please be aware that the session is being audio recorded. Wanted to let you know that, and it's wonderful because you can listen to it again later. Please make sure your cell phones are muted at this time. We ask that everyone have an open mind. We are all here to learn. Robin and Riley have indicated that they have set time aside at the end for questions, so please jot down your questions and save them for the end. We're going to try to have about 15 minutes for questions. We ask that you limit your questions and comments to one brief comment or question so that others have time to speak, and we'll do our best to get as many of the questions in as we can. A word about confidentiality. Although confidentiality cannot be guaranteed, we do ask that you not repeat personal information that is shared in this workshop. And if you need any extra assistance, we know some of these subjects are sensitive. Please feel free to access one of our counseling professionals. You can check in with someone in the lobby and they'll direct you, or contact me and I'll show you where to go. The nearest restrooms are in the lobby, right across from the registration desk. And that's it for general things. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Robin Nordmeyer and Riley Karbon. Robin is the founder and CEO of the Center for Living Well with ADHD, LLC. She began coaching in 2010 after completing her life coach training through Adler Graduate School and the ADHD coach training through the Mentor Coach Advanced ADHD Coaching Program. Her love of learning and coaching individuals with ADHD centers on her passion for improving quality of life and assisting others in reaching their fair and full potential. Robin specializes in aiding professionals to manage ADHD in the workplace, guiding entrepreneurs with ADHD to develop systems, skills, and strategies to help with daily business operations, helping couples address the impact of ADHD in their relationships, and preparing teens for transitions to college or independent living. Over the years, her company has evolved into a partnership, a team of highly specialized ADHD coaches located in several states across the United States who provide coaching for all ages and stages of life with ADHD worldwide. Our second presenter, Riley Karbon, has received her life coaching certification from Life Purpose Institute and is a professional certified ADHD coach through the Professional Association of ADHD Coaches. She is a professional member of the ADHD Coaches Organization, and she works with the Center for Living Well with ADHD with several specialties around organizing, finances, and productivity for college students and adults with ADHD. She has experienced firsthand the wonders that ADHD coaching can do for creating a more calm and organized life. And she wakes up daily excited to partner with fellow ADHDers to find solutions for their unique lives. So it's my pleasure to now turn it over to Robin and Riley.
Wonderful. Thanks for that introduction, Sherry. So welcome, everyone, to ADHD Unveiled, What We Know Now in a Journey of a Lifetime. So here are our pictures. I'm Riley, this is Robin, and we actually have another ADHD coach from our center in the audience as well. This is Alicia. So what we're going to talk about today, we are going to do a lot of myth busting, talking about what actually is ADHD, describing what are the traits that we often see in ADHD folks. And then talk about what is it like to have ADHD, how can you live well as have your symptoms well managed, and live well with ADHD. Both Rob and I are local. I'm in St. Paul, and I was actually diagnosed as an adult in 2017. And I really find that there's a lot of freedom in knowing exactly what you're working with, like knowing exactly the brain that you have, and then also knowing how that's different from neurotypical brains. There's a lot of freedom in, again, wrapping your arms all the way around a diagnosis. As Sherry said, I work with college students and adults, and I work with procrastination, overwhelm, disorganization, and financial stress. I wanted to start off with a little bit of a statement of unmasking. So I have ADHD. I'm combined type. I took my meds this morning, so I'm going to be, a lot more focused than I normally would be. But we've got about 3 different sets of notes. You'll see me reading off of notes. I've got this large time up here as well, because I will miss it otherwise. And then you'll notice, like, while Robin is speaking, I might sway, or I might play with my hands or kind of twist my ring a little bit. And I just wanted to unmask and say, that's how ADHD shows up for me. So if you're noticing that, what I'm doing is I'm helping myself pay attention better. So I'll let Robin speak to herself.
Yes, and thanks for the introduction. I'll let you know I have ADHD as well. My story is my children were diagnosed, and I didn't think I had it, but I am a woman with ADHD, and so a lot of the symptoms that are quite typical in early presentations was not mine, but come to find out, yes, indeed, I have it. And so I can totally identify with what's going on in our audience. I have a lot of stories and moments when it's been really impactful, getting to know this is my brain, this is how I work, this is how I need to do things. I want to take a few moments real quick too, because Alicia has shown up today to help us at the exhibitor table. Alicia is in southeastern Minnesota, and she works with children 3 to 11. She coaches with parents, she coaches with young adults, and college and grad students and educators. So if you have a chance, go and say hi to her at the table today while she's here. And thank you, Alicia, for being here with us today.
So I hope most of you got the handout. If you would write down your questions, again, we're going to have some ample time at the end. But if you've got ADHD, don't rely on your working memory. Instead, take a chance to write that down, and then we'd love for you to just share those at the end. So quick questions for the audience. Who here either has ADHD or knows somebody with ADHD? Can I have you raise your hand? Okay, so it's nearly every person. Okay. And then about how many professionals are there who work with clients, patients that have ADHD? Can I have you raise your hand? Okay, nice. So it really looks like we've got some pretty deep connections to ADHD here. So let's talk about this first myth. All I need to know about ADHD, I can learn on TikTok. Robin and I have a lot of experience with our clients coming to us say, I saw this video on TikTok and I heard ADHD people are like this or like that. So we're here today because we want you to build your foundation of ADHD knowledge on research-based resources. We know there's a conference specifically for people who do research in the ADHD field. And at a recent conference, it's called the APSARD conference, they found that over 50% of the video or information that you're seeing on TikTok is misleading. So TikTok is not a great place to build that foundational learning. So we'll have you come along with us and talk about what it actually is. So what is ADHD? This is a neurodevelopmental disorder. I'm going to read from my notes to describe exactly what that is. Neurodevelopmental disorders are multifaceted conditions characterized by impairments in cognition, communication, behavior and or motor skills resulting from abnormal brain development. So what I mean by this is ADHD is a brain-based disorder. This is not anything to do with our character or work ethic or anything else. This is a brain-based disorder. So what parts of the brain do you ask? ADHD affects the frontal cortex, which is responsible for our attention, executive function, and organization. ADHD affects our limbic systems. This is a deeper part of the brain that's responsible for regulating emotions and attention. Also the basal ganglia. So deficiency here can cause information to short circuit, which can result in inattention or impulsivity. And then the reticular activating system. Again, a deficiency here can cause inattention, impulsivity, or hyperactivity. And here's a little stat up here. Dr. Russell Barkley is a really well-known researcher in the ADHD field, and he found that generally, when we're looking at kids with ADHD, and remember, this is a brain-based developmental disorder, kids with ADHD can be about 30% behind their peers when it comes to observing them and noticing their kind of like emotional maturity. So if we're looking at a 15-year-old, our expectations for a 15-year-old with ADHD are actually much more in line with like a 10-year-old. So I know we talked to a lot of parents this morning, so I want to just point that out, that like if you're noticing that your child is kind of behind their peers when it comes to maturity, you're not alone with that, and that's a very, very real thing. Myth number 2, you may have already guessed, but children growing out of their ADHD, not really true. We know that most people continue to have symptoms throughout their lifetime. Recently, the DSM-5, so the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, is what people use to evaluate folks with ADHD. And there was a recent change from the 4th edition to the 5th edition. ADHD changed from a disorder that was, commonly diagnosed in childhood, and instead changed to this neurodevelopmental disorder with symptoms listed that includes adults and children. So we know that the presentation of symptoms can sometimes change. So I'm thinking of like my brother when I say this. My dad used to have him run laps around the house, like the outside of the house, just to burn off some energy when he was a kid. But he doesn't have that now. He's got a really calm demeanor now, and so more of his like hyperactivity has kind of gone internal. He's still got a lot of thoughts that are swirling around and has a pretty busy brain. So again, symptoms can be all throughout childhood, and people can be diagnosed as a child, as an adult, after they retire. Any of that is really normal these days. So how do people actually get diagnosed? I wanted to give you the exact criteria that trained evaluators, licensed evaluators, look at when they're trying to diagnose somebody with ADHD. So this is the first type. There's 3 types total. Inattentive is one, and then hyperactive impulsive is another, and then the third one is the combined type. So I mentioned that I've got both. So I've got both inattentive and the hyperactive impulsive one together. So this is a lot of kind of dry language, so I thought I'd give you some examples of how inattentiveness might show up or what you might notice. So inattentive would be the mind wanderers, the daydreamers, the kids that can sit through an entire class and miss what the homework is, miss that they've got an important deadline coming up. These are my college students who notice that they panic about writing a paper, and they study or they write that paper at the very, very end before it's due. I myself would stay up until like 4 a.m. in college writing my papers. I never, ever started more than the day before they were due, and it was incredibly stressful and really, really hard. In coaching, of course, we talk a little bit about notice what you do when you panic. So after I panicked, I would call my mom to actually talk about my paper. And we noticed that as I was talking about my paper, that was me writing my paper. I needed to verbalize it out loud first so I could really know what I was going to write about. When I'll, again, talk to college students about what do you do after you panic, they usually say, well, I turn off my phone, I tell all my friends not to bother me, I clear all of my schedules, I don't go to any meetings, and then I lock myself in a quiet room in the library with noise-canceling headphones, and I focus. And I go, oh, so you've just told us what you need. But before this, before you panicked, you weren't telling your friends not to bother you. You were trying to do work while your phone was right next to you. You were trying to do work in your room, which is often a place filled with a lot of distractions. My adult clients, these are clients who have trouble paying attention in meetings, and especially as people have gone home to do Zoom calls. I've got one client, we discovered that if he plays a video game during this long 2-hour meeting that he's got this kind of reports each week, he can pay attention so much better. But from the outside, someone knowing that he plays video games during this meeting can be like, what are you doing? Why are you not paying attention? Why are you not taking this seriously? But for him, that gives him the stimulation he needs to stay engaged, and he has much better focus when he plays video games. I've got a couple clients right now who are doing wedding planning, and they notice they're having a really hard time with tasks that are kind of have a lot of little steps, and they got to do over time. So we're talking about how can we make that a lot less overwhelming. We hear a lot from couples as well who are mixed in their marriages, and a lot of times the non-ADHD person kind of becomes the executive function of the ADHD partner. So they're having to do a lot of reminding, and they can get really frustrated when they're giving their ADHD partner something to do, and the ADHD partner either doesn't do it, forgets about it, or needs a ton of reminders. So again, in ADHD coaching, we learn how the ADHD person, the ADHD spouse, can take on more of that. Okay, I'm noticing the time, so I'm going to continue along. Next one is hyperactive. So this is the one that we kind of think of as traditional or classic ADHD. This is the one that if we're thinking stereotypically, aka not inclusive or not correct, that people can see pretty easily. So this is the kid who can't sit still, the kid who gets out of his seat and runs out of the classroom. I'm thinking of my nephew who did Vacation Bible School as a little kid, and the rest of his group kind of stayed with their leader, but he was out in front, running around, like literally like running circles around the entire group as they like moved through the sanctuary to their seats. Or he'd be outside and he would go find the swing set somewhere so he could play instead. This can also be, let's see, I don't have a pen in front of me, but if you were to come home with me and look at all of my pens in my office, I will have like broken off all of the clips on there because I play with them. Yeah, exactly. Because I play with them so much. My body has a hard time sitting still. This is also the folks who talk really fast. And you notice that you have a hard time keeping up with them or a hard time maybe following their train of thought, but they're talking so fast and you're noticing it's really hard to keep up with them. Yeah, is that you? Absolutely. So what they shared was their brain's going so fast that their mouth can't even catch up. So they're noticing that they even slur their words because they're trying to keep up with their brain, but their mouth can't move fast enough. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, or stalling and then nothing comes out. That is very, very real. Yeah, great examples there. Let's see. This is also my clients who, if I don't interrupt them, they will talk for the entire hour. They will absolutely talk, and then they'll be surprised when I say, we gotta go, because they didn't even notice that the time had passed. So again, this is the one that people kind of think of if they stereotypically think about ADHD, and it's certainly a part of it, but it's not just that. Last one is impulsive. So again, impulsive and hyperactivity, that's a type together. This is finishing other people's sentences. This is having trouble waiting in line. I know if I'm noticing, like at the airport or when I'm traveling, if there is inefficiency when waiting in line, I sometimes have gone to the front of the line to help like organize people to get them through faster because I've just been so uncomfortable waiting in line. This would also be using things without people's permission. In kids, actually this may be more hyperactive, bugging their siblings, like just not being able to help themselves on a car trip and just poking, teasing, interacting, and just not even being able to have their bodies calm down. For adults and adolescents, this could be somebody really coming in and taking over a project. Maybe it was already established, but they're coming in and then they've kind of got the right way to do things, and they want to make very quick decisions. This can also look like impulsive decisions. You know, I work with folks who have financial troubles. They notice that they're impulsive spenders. And then, of course, we talk about, well, what are the reasons why that happens, and notice where you do and don't have control when you're trying to have appropriate spending. I had another client, this is actually for emotional dysregulation. So emotional dysregulation, this actually isn't a part of the DSM-5 at the moment, but it's a very well-known, well-researched part of ADHD. So like if you go to ADHD conferences, you'll hear emotional dysregulation talked about. And so what does that look like? In kids, this can look like, and adults, low frustration tolerance. Maybe they're learning something new, and if they don't get it right away, they can get really frustrated. So maybe they're trying to play a game, somebody's trying to explain it, and they're like, let's just do it. And then if they're not good at it, maybe like flipping the game over, throwing a laptop, like having a really hard time if something's not going well. I remember I was working with a client once who had a lot of trouble with writing angry emails. When she would sort of feel attacked at work, she would write just scathing emails that then she would be really embarrassed by the next day. So again, we worked through, are you noticing the impulse to, and what you're feeling, that you're feeling so flooded, that you're feeling like you have to write this big angry email. So again, this emotional dysregulation, a big part of ADHD, but not necessarily what they're using in the DSM-5 to evaluate people at the moment. Other examples in kids, this can look like shutdown. They're something is trying to be explained to them, they're trying to work on something, it's getting hard, and then they just shut down. Don't talk, silent treatment, and for the ADHD person, I remember doing this as a kid, and it was often around decision making. I was having a really hard time making decisions. And someone would be pressuring me, like, hey, Riley, we gotta go. You know, make this decision about what candy you're gonna buy or something. And I would just shut down, and I would get so angry at myself, angry at the world, and feel so uncomfortable that I couldn't get myself out of it. And I would really stay in that dysregulation for a long time. My parents would be like, Riley, what's wrong? And I would just not want anybody to talk to me. So this emotional dysregulation can be a really big deal, again, for both kids and adults. So we talked about this a little bit. Having ADHD is not about bad character, not about poor work ethic or low intelligence. And in fact, thinking this, which is incorrect, can be really harmful to ADHD folks to think like this. Essentially what's happening here is people are trying to create meaning or ascribing meaning to ADHD symptoms. So I'm going to describe more about what I mean about that. So we often like to, actually I need to drink water for a second. So when describing ADHD, we borrowed this metaphor, the iceberg metaphor, from Chris Dendy. And what she talks about is what we observe as outside observers for ADHD symptoms are about like an eighth of what's actually going on with the person. So this iceberg metaphor means like what we see at the top is only this tiny bit. Icebergs, there's this big mass underneath. So if you're observing someone with ADHD, friends, you loved one with ADHD, you're observing this little bit, but what's going on inside for them is this big part that we might not be able to see. So what might be below the surface? There's executive function deficits. There can be learning disabilities, so think dyslexia, auditory processing disorder, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. Coexisting conditions are huge. ADHD often does not come alone. So this could be autism spectrum disorder, eating disorders, OCD, bipolar, depression, anxiety, substance use disorder. Often, when I'm doing an intake with a new client, they don't just have ADHD. I don't think anybody has had just ADHD. It's coming along usually with something else. Sleep challenges often go hand in hand with ADHD, and they can make symptoms a lot worse, as anybody does. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're not functioning as well as you could be. Time issues, hard time knowing how much time has passed. Again, this is why I'm looking at the clock up here, and I've got a bunch of notes about my timing. So having an impaired sense of time, not being able to estimate how long things are going to take. And then we talked about dysregulated emotions on the slide before. So let's talk a little bit about this iceberg metaphor. What are we seeing, and then what's actually going on underneath? So we might be able to observe somebody talking too much. They take over a conversation. In school, they have a hard time not being the one to answer questions, or asking a ton of questions from the teacher, and the teacher is finding that, I got to pay attention to the other kids too, but obviously this kid has a lot of questions for me. So what's under the surface is that we know that ADHD folks can sometimes have a hard time doing goal-directed thinking inside of their heads. So verbal processing is actually their way of thinking. My mentor, my coach, talks about for ADHD folks, often to not to talk is not to think. So trying to say, stop talking or don't talk so much would actually be asking them to be neurotypical. No. Instead, how can we find an environment where they can talk out loud as much as they need to do their thinking? Noticing having a hard time falling asleep. So it's not obviously not a cause of ADHD, but sleep issues we often see in our ADHD clients. So going to sleep is pretty boring. You're supposed to lay there with your body still and just kind of wait until sleep comes to you. You have described kind of ADHD kryptonite there, going to sleep. So many of my clients will use something to get them to go to sleep. They'll listen to a podcast. They'll watch a movie they've watched a million times before. They will watch a show, listen to a show on Netflix, again, that they've watched a bunch before. How can they get enough stimulation, but not too much that's going to keep them up? So usually when somebody's telling me they have sleep issues, I'm asking, what is it that's keeping you up at night? How is your brain entertaining themselves? And usually then we'll talk about something to do with screens. So again, screens are not bad, but I've got one client I'll never forget. She said when she does the crossword app, she finds herself her eyes starting to go shut when she's doing the crossword app. But Instagram or anything that has endless scrolling or YouTube videos that automatically go forward, that will keep her up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So again, we're not trying to say don't use anything. We're trying to say the right amount, the balance of stimulation. Somebody running late, this has nothing to do with how much they respect or how important the meeting is for them. ADHD brains have trouble remembering from the past, how long did that thing take in the past? And then their brain's automatically saying, hey, remember, that time in the past you ran late, so what do you have to do in order to not run late this time? That connection for us, we've got a deficit in our working memories. So running late is actually a symptom of the disorder. It is not anything to do with someone's character. I like to use the metaphor that ADHD folks living in a neurotypical world is like being judged like a fish on its ability to climb a tree. So again, I didn't make that up. I borrowed that from somebody else. But really, when we are being judged by how well we are neurotypical, that doesn't work. We've got ADHD. We aren't neurotypical. So there can be some misinformed judgments there. I'm looking at the time. So disorganized is the last one that I'll talk about here. So I work a lot of times with people, who tell me that they've got really messy desks or their homes are really messy. And one of my first questions as a coach is, tell me about what this actually is. Because a lot of times, there might be some trash they need to pick up, but a lot of times they tell me, if I were to put stuff away where I can't see it, I'm going to forget about it. I'm going to forget where it is. I'm going to forget I need to take it with me. So instead, leaving stuff out, I ask them if they've got stacks of papers at home, well, could you find a particular paper? And that, well, absolutely. I go to this stack over here, it's about 5 from the bottom. And everybody else is like, well, wait a minute, how did you know that that was even there? So we know that ADHD people are actually organized, but their organization does not look the same way that maybe neurotypical people are expecting. Yeah, do you have an experience with that? Organized mess. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So in coaching, we really talk about what's the function versus the aesthetic. We are not Martha Stewart. We are not Marie Kondo. Instead, how is this actually working for you? Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would talk about highly sensitive.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, I'll make it up on my end.
Okay, sounds good. This highly sensitive part, if you know somebody with ADHD or you've got ADHD yourself, you might be feeling that you're sort of extra sensitive to criticism or being told once again that you forgot. Once again, you misinterpreted what somebody said. And, folks who haven't been diagnosed until adulthood or were diagnosed as a kid, but then the diagnosis wasn't well understood, we can be pretty sensitive about it because we have already endured a lifetime of corrections. Mm-hmm. Slow down. Don't talk so much. You forgot again. How could you do this again? Oh, you're running late again. Again, for me, how did you get in this situation where you're writing your paper or doing your project the night before it was due again? So under the surface here, we've had to deal with a bunch of neurotypical judgments on top of us. So it can make us kind of sensitive to once again being pointed out how we're failing at being neurotypical. So that can make us pretty sensitive. So now I'm going to turn this over to Robin for our next myth.
Beautiful, beautiful job painting the story of walking in the shoes with ADHD. So love it, love it. I'll try. I won't tell as many stories. So we get out of here. Anyway, it's time for another myth, and that myth is that there is a singular or a quick fix or cure for ADHD, and the truth is that there is not. Navigating ADHD is a journey, and managing it is something that you may be doing off and on throughout a lifetime, through the different ages, stages, and changes that go on in your life. There's definitely no cure for ADHD. Oftentimes our clients come to us, and once they're diagnosed, they're a bit preoccupied about medication. Do I take it? Do I not take it? It's a personal decision. It's working with a clinician to make those choices. But what we know is medication can be a super game changer. It can be very helpful. Not all people can take medication. It's not the entire solution. In fact, the research that has been out there for years and years has demonstrated that a multimodal approach for managing ADHD is the most beneficial way to go. So what we're going to talk about is the journey. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. 2 fingers. There we go. So this is a more accurate picture of what the journey looks like with ADHD. And I'll dive deeper into each of these in the following slides. But first is the evaluation and the consideration of treatment if you decide to go that route. What's nice about that is there are a lot of lookalikes like ADHD, and because of the comorbidities, you want to make sure that you're seeing somebody who is well-averse in what ADHD is and what the other co-occurring conditions are so they can tease it out a little bit. The second is building an accurate knowledge or foundation of knowledge for ADHD. And so there is a lot of information out there. I will talk about it in a little more depth, but it's important to start with the information that is research-based, that's solid and tried and true. And it's also important to work on your own self-awareness because your manifestation of ADHD and the symptoms is different than the next. And so the more you develop self-awareness around how it shows up uniquely for you, the better you are to make decisions about different strategies or which skills you might want to focus on. I like to say that just like every snowflake is different or every thumbprint is different, so is individuals with ADHD. Next is the self-care, huge, also considered an alternative approach to managing ADHD. It's important to know what helps and what hinders in your self-care strategies so you can make the most of your brain and your ability to function cognitively. Then there are the 3 M's. So that's leveraging the benefits of mindfulness, leaning more into a growth mindset, understanding what motivates you. And then there's the skills thing. So Riley talked about 30%. The number, but what happens is when we are growing up with our ADHD, there is a gap in skills that are developing compared to your peer group. And sometimes it levels out as you get closer into or further into adulthood. But it's important to know which executive function skills are strengths for you and which ones have a little bit of a gap in the development so you can strengthen them a bit or even apply the stronger ones to help with the weaker ones. And then there's soft skills. So we have a lot of clients who, they have executive function skill gaps, but they also have some gaps around communication or social skills and problem solving, things like that. And then a toolbox of success strategies. So these are the many ADHD hacks and ideas you see out there. And it's important to figure out which ones are going to work uniquely for you. A support team. Can't say enough about it. It takes a village. Find your village. Find the people who will champion you. You don't have to go at this alone. You're much better off if you don't. So, especially with ADHD coaching, I like to think of it as a holistic approach, and same with the journey of living a life with ADHD. This is from Susan Walter, who's the co-founder of American Holistic Health Association, and it is a bit abbreviated, but the belief is the approach to life, shifting from a focus on illness or specific body parts to consideration of the whole person and how they interact with their environment. And as ADHD coaches, we are seeing the whole person. We are not doing the whole job. We are doing the part that we can do in our lane as coaching, but then there is that village, that support team that is also supporting the whole person. All of these are interconnected approaches, and they are best to address the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual needs of an individual. So let's dive into the journey a little more. Oh, it's a myth again. All right, well, ADHD is overdiagnosed. How many have heard that, right? Yeah. And so the rates of diagnosis are going to vary due to diagnostic criteria and the measurement methods or the approach to getting that diagnosis, and actually could be underreported. And they can be underreported because of maybe some stigma. Maybe someone doesn't want to go down that lane and say, yes, I have ADHD. Maybe it's a culture that doesn't like to focus on ADHD. The current data from National Institutes of Health and the Center for Disease Control has floated recent numbers that 7 million children ages 3 to 17 by parent reporting scales have ADHD. That was in 2022. And more recently, we're seeing that 15.5 million US adults, 1/3 of which have been diagnosed later in their life, have ADHD. And those are more recent numbers. And I'm sure all of you, especially those who are professionals in the room, have had, moments when ADHD has come up in a topic where you've questioned it, or maybe you've felt that stigma that's out there, and consider your own first reaction. How did you think about it? Everybody else is out there having those same thoughts. And so I would say that it's not diagnosed. Now, we will hear, everybody has a little bit of ADHD every day. Who's heard that one? That's a big one, right? Yeah, we have a busy lifestyle. We have lots of electronic input in our lives. We're pushed to do more than we can possibly get done in any given day. Why wouldn't we be a little distracted and a little forgetful and maybe a little impulsive or cranky, right? But there's a big difference. There's a big difference than living a busy life with ADHD-like symptoms or having ADHD and experiencing it every day in your life, right? So someone with ADHD is going to feel it more intensely, and they're going to experience it more frequently. One reason why we have the recent spike, too, is changes in circumstances. We've had the pandemic where everybody went from structured office environments to working from home. Kids went from schoolrooms and classes and teacher supervision to being sometimes on their own, learning electronically. So then there's, in your life stage, things are going to change in your life, and it's going to create a tipping point for you. And what you thought you had handled is all of a sudden, hard. And you're wondering what's wrong, what's going on, right? It can happen for women in menopause. It can happen when in retirement, when you're busy working, and then all of a sudden you have all the time in the world and the structure goes away. So it will come in different situations. I think there's been a big increase in awareness, and especially with women not diagnosed earlier in their life, more so leaning into anxiety and depression for symptoms and not realizing that they actually had ADHD. It's just they didn't present in the classic way. So, yeah, I'm going to have to hurry. Okay, so what slide am I on here? All right, so evaluation and treatment. There's no single test for ADHD, right? It takes comprehensive evaluation. It should include several key components. Individuals start realizing life is just a little bit harder. And what's going on, or maybe they're noticing someone who has ADHD who's talking about ADHD and they see the similarities. I didn't think I had it until my kids were diagnosed, and then I started learning a lot about it and seeing the similarities in even myself. An evaluation is done by a clinical health provider or clinician who can conduct a medical assessment or a psychoeducational assessment. Those medical assessments are going to be reviewing medical history, physical exams, looking at educational history, symptoms. Riley shared the DSM-5, did a wonderful job going through all that with you. And they're going to notice the quality of daily function. And then there's psychoeducational assessments. I think several are very familiar with this in the room, sometimes known as a neuropsychological evaluation, diagnostic interviews, standardized rating scales. There's a lot of ways we can dig in and really get clear about what's going on. The types of professionals that you will reach out to. Do I have them on the slide? Yeah, they're on the slide. So I won't list them all. They can either do the psychoeducational assessments or they can do the medical assessments depending on what their clinical role is. So we better go on. So ADHD can show up mild, moderate, or severe, depending on the manifestation. You may or may not need medication. But remember to take a holistic, multimodal approach and be open to exploring what's best for you. There might be some resistance. Am I on the wrong side? Okay, there might be some resistance with taking the first step. Just know that the diagnosis opens the door to a much healthier explanation about who you are, what you're capable of, and without it, you'll have a diminished perspective of who you are and what you're truly capable of. The data shows that life trajectories tend to take on a difficult course with unmanaged ADHD. Dr. Russell Barkley has done research out there that shows that even years off the lifespan are taken when someone does not manage ADHD. And there's lots of poor outcomes. I'm not going to list them all, but I'm happy to answer questions about it as we need to. Let's go on to the next slide. ADHD knowledge, you already did. Okay. So build a foundation of research-based resources, where we're always learning, growing, evolving. The more you understand, the more empowered you'll be. Make sure what you're looking at is from the experts, from thought leaders. Watch out for words like curing or quick transformation. All right. It's important to develop your self-awareness and really think about how you think about things, how you evaluate and perceive who you are. I like to say shine the light on what is right. Growing up, we probably see a dozen negative messages to every positive message. Just being ADHD, a lot of automatic negative thinking, a lot of limiting beliefs happens across that time. So we need to spend more time paying attention to what's right. The ratio out there is about a dozen to one, dozen negative messages to one positive message for some of the children growing up with ADHD. Lean into your strengths, know what they are, call them out as parents. I see in you what I know about you. Call them out as much as you can. Notice the traits that are actually something that lends more to their genius, that allows them to contribute in big ways. Let's go to self-care. This is a big one. Practice self-care. And this will really help you manifest the best. What I would say is none of these things cause ADHD, but if you don't pay attention to these things, it can make your version of ADHD or your symptoms of ADHD a lot worse. So the areas we pay attention to are diet, proteins, complex carbs, essential oils, vitamins, minerals, sleep. Riley covered a lot about sleep already, so I'm not going to repeat any of that, but about 50% or more of individuals with ADHD do have a sleep-related challenge of some sort. It's either getting to sleep, staying asleep, waking up, our circadian rhythms getting out of whack, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome. That needs to be evaluated by a physician if you think that might be you. Healthy coping skills. Healthy coping skills. Riley pointed out the emotional component here. And so we need to learn how to do that breathing. We need to learn strategies to help us calm down. We need to be able to catch some of this automatic negative self-talk and limiting beliefs and challenge them, be more curious about them. Having self-compassion. A lot of times individuals with ADHD are harder on themselves than they are their best friends or their loved ones, right? And so understanding that, is this how I would talk to my friend or my child, right? Listen how you're speaking to yourself. Listen to what your thoughts are saying about you and the critical piece of this, and think, how would I encourage somebody else? How would I help somebody else? Addressing co-occurring conditions, important. Are you gonna, okay. Myth 6, just do it like me. Dr. Russell Ramsey, another expert and thought leader, says if you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, right? Let's go on to use of mindfulness and ADHD. And so I call this the 3 M's: mindfulness, mindset, motivators. So mindfulness, very, very important to help with our cognitive abilities, our emotional regulation. Mindset, we've heard a lot. Carol Dweck talks about growth mindset and fixed mindset, and a lot of times we can get caught up in a fixed mindset. And so really understanding more about that and practicing a healthier way to think about things, super important. And then motivators. So there's intrinsic motivators and there's extrinsic motivators. I'll just say a few. Intrinsic motivators are the values, the things that you deem to be really important, your strengths, your character strengths, areas of high interest and passion with ADHD, and even the Maslow's hierarchy can give you some insight into that. Extrinsic motivators, talk a lot with clients about their 5 love languages and looking for some positive reinforcements and ideas that speak to that to help them. External gratifications, a lot of times we focus on urgency and we use immediate pressures to get into action, and that can work for us until it's overused, and then it causes more stress in our life than what we can handle in a healthy way. Practice gratitude, acknowledge wins. I'll tell you real quick, a lot of my clients, I say, before you go to bed at night, write down your 3 wins in your journal, and when you wake up in the morning, write down the 3 things you're grateful. And this alone can really change perspective and outlook for them. They have a hard time thinking about their wins, right? We can always think about what's wrong. We can always think about what we didn't do well, but we have a hard time in the moment accessing what we did do well and our strengths as well. Let's see, next slide. Myth number 7, I just have to work harder. Everyone is different in what works best. It's not about trying harder. It's more important to approach what you do in the way that works for you. A lot of times we look to the left and the right and we see our peers doing things so easily, so differently, and we're harsh on ourselves in that way, when we really just have to understand our brain wiring and what works for us. The next is skills. Now, these are the executive function skills by Dr. Dawson and Guari. We use these. I use these in coaching to find which ones are strengths, which one are the gaps, because as we're coaching with their goals and the strategies and the actions they want to take, we want to weigh these in and really build some up or find some ways to bridge with strategies around the ones that are harder. And then I already talked about soft skills, so I have some on the slide. Let's go on to success strategies. Know what works. So what are your best learning modalities? How do you process information in situations? Where have you been successful before? Dig into your past. You do have wins. You do have successes. Lean into your strengths. And there's a whole host of wonderful traits that are often seen in individuals with ADHD that are huge helps and a catalyst for their success. So, myth 8, I can handle this on my own. I mentioned build your support team. This can be clinical professionals. This can be ADHD coaches. This can be positive friends, mentors, spouses, advocates, educators, your community, even paid assistants. It's important to work on that and build that in order to support you in the journey.
How much time do we have?
Okay, 5 minutes. So we want you to think about, what are your next steps? What'd you learn today? Why does it matter? And how might you apply this knowledge to help yourself or to help someone with ADHD? We've got, if you came to visit our table today, we have a little card that talks about the free classes that we're offering today and the dates about those coming up, if you'd like to take advantage of those. And this is the part where we want to ask you for your questions. We talked about ADHD as a neurodevelopmental disorder. We busted a lot of myths. Talked about how we need to take this as a holistic approach, and then some ideas for next steps to champion ADHD. So what can we answer for you? Yeah.
Should I?
Is this genetic? So my understanding is that how genes express themselves are different with ADHD. My understanding is that ADHD is heritable, but I don't think that we can directly say that ADHD is genetic. So we often see it in families, but that would be a little bit outside of my knowledge. Great question, though. Yeah, in the green. Co-occurring disorders?
Yes, I have a question. What are the co-occurring things associated with ADHD? Because I think some of my OCD patterns help me cope with my ADHD. So it's kind of like they don't kind of go together, but they kind of do.
Yeah. So ADHD, as we talked about, often comes with friends. I don't think I have any clients who at least didn't tell me that they had depression or anxiety. And with OCD, the symptoms of OCD and ADHD can overlap. You know, you can have in a Venn diagram, you can have the same things that are from ADHD as well as OCD. So you're right, there's absolutely other stuff can come along, other mental health issues can come along with ADHD.
Yeah, is the coaching covered at all by like insurance or for kids who have qualified for TEFRA and SMRTed and have MA? Like, does MA or the CADI waiver pay for something such as coaching, or do they have to go to like a mental health provider to get the coaching?
Yeah, great question. One way that we often get. At the moment, I have not found any insurance that covers ADHD coaching directly. It is a part of the like ADHD goals in our community to someday have coaching covered. I have had clients use their FSA or HSA dollars to pay for coaching, as well as the adults that I work with have had their jobs pay for ADHD coaching, or if they have access to professional development dollars. You know, we just call it executive function coaching. We don't need to call it ADHD coaching at work. I've had independent contractors talk to their accountants about ADHD coaching as a business expense. And then I think that's my last one. But yeah, great question. Not directly at the moment covered by insurance. Great question.
I have a question about medications.
Yeah.
Which you may be able to answer. It's a two-part question. First is that I've heard that some medications you can start taking it and then your body adjusts, and over time you need to take more. I'm wondering if that is a myth or if you found that to be true. And the second part of the question is, once you start taking a medication and some of your symptoms go down, I'm assuming you still have the ADHD, but how do you, it's kind of hard to put this in words, how do you distinguish between what you have and what you don't? How do the medications?
Yeah, so I'll do my best to answer this. I will say that if anybody has specific medications for themselves, please talk to your prescriber for sure. Because I'm a coach, I'm not a licensed mental health professional. What I will say is that I think your first question, I have lost it now. I have the second one in my head. The second one first. Okay. So ADHD means that we have a deficit in brain function. And this is a deficit that we will have for our entire lives. So medication is a part of an accommodation for our brains. So if medication works, you're noticing your symptoms are reduced, great. You are getting help from medication. But you stop taking medication and then they show up again, you can kind of see the difference.
I'm going to add
Go ahead.
in there too. Remember, I talked about it's a holistic approach. I didn't get to tell a story, but my big aha moment was when my teenage daughter looked at me and said, "Mom, without this pill, I can't do anything. And the holistic approach to navigating ADHD is to take care of those other things that were on that slide as well. Don't rely 100% on medication. It's a game changer. It makes a huge difference. But there are so many other things you can do that are going to minimize the impact of your ADHD. So,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, but we're at time. I just wanted to take 1 minute and thank you both. This has been an absolutely phenomenal presentation. It's just been terrific. There's been so much information, so it's so appreciated. I want to remind everyone about the green evaluation in your packet. Please fill it out. We really need to know what you liked, what you think we could do better, and ideas for future conferences. So thank you all for attending. Lunch is downstairs, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks much.